Audiophiles. Hi everyone. Today we compared the baritone speaker cable with the tenor speaker cable and the XLR interconnect cable. Baritone versus tenor. The length between the preamplifier and the power amplifier was 1.5 meters. Tell us what we listened to and what kind of non-standard test we did with that noise. I'll start with what we began with, the non-standard part. Based on our agreement, we tried using the test mode, or test track, from the XLO CD. Actually, we used that noise as a form of sound comparison. It is actually noise, or a signal for burn-in. For faster equipment, burn-in. Exactly. And what was surprising, we had the chance to hear differences within this noise, between the individual cables. Whether it was the speaker cables or the XLR interconnects, the difference was audible. So there were differences even in the noise. Please describe what kind of noise it was, or what sounds we were listening to. In the meantime, I'll check the name of the track. It was from the XLO Reference Recording Test and Burn-in CD. From that, we used track 9, the 15-minute system burn, the burn-in track. Yes, the burn-in track. What was mainly interesting about it was that any differences were audible at all, and that they were so significant just surprised me. First, we listened to it, of course, on the best cables, in the best configuration we had, completely equipped with tenor. Yes. Then we first swapped the speaker cables, meaning we stepped down. We used baritone speaker cables, and there was already a quite significant difference. It's hard to describe, because describing space in noise is actually very complex. But there was a significant difference in the spatiality of this noise. It's a strange thing to say it like this, but the noise really managed to demonstrate it, and very clearly. I even think a layperson's ear could hear this. Besides the noise, there were also whistling sounds, or similar to sine waves. The difference wasn't as significant there. Maybe if only that burn-in sine wave was running, we might say it's plus or minus the same. But the noise itself showed how it spread out in the best configuration, and how it narrowed, or somehow shrank, when it was on the baritone speaker cables, or when connecting the XLR cables, although it was perhaps less pronounced there. Meaning that reduction in spatiality. And what did you hear in that noise? What do you mean by spatiality? How should we imagine it? Like molecules in a space that are sometimes in a smaller and sometimes in a larger space. That's simply how I would imagine it, but with the same quantity, right? So once they are flying more freely, and then they are more packed together. That's how I would describe it. Afterward, we had the opportunity to listen further, to make it a bit more objective. We listened to other tracks. One more question. Did you hear tonal differences in the noise? Was the noise brighter or darker, with more treble? You could say it was a bit brighter. If we want to call it that, it was somewhat brighter on the quality cables. Both are quality, but, I mean, the higher class, the higher grade. You could hear it was brighter. Should I understand it as the highs being boosted? It wasn't that ching-boom kind of treble boost. I wouldn't call it that. Rather, it breathed. It got more air again, like when you let more air into a fire. No, I wouldn't call it like the highs were made to go ching-boom. Okay, so that wasn't the case. Definitely not. As I said, it was a brightening. It really breathed. So let's get to the point. Basically, it manifested itself very interestingly. We were listening to Kari Bremnes, the second track, Coastal Ship, and it showed very interestingly, and again, somewhat unexpectedly. We thought the voice, of course, you could feel it was a bit more veiled compared to the tenor. On the baritone, it was a bit more veiled, but it wasn't so significant. The voice was beautifully centered and contoured in the middle. It sounded very present, as if the singer were right here. But what was surprising, the musical layer in the back, the bass tone, and that drum, which was a drum mic'd in such a strange way. You could hear the loss of space on that, which I didn't expect on that specifically. I thought it would be more on the singer or some background artifacts, but no. Right on the drum, on the decay of that drum, it was much more spacious with the tenor than it was with the baritone. Yes, significantly. And what I'd also like to say, the singer, as part of her performance, made a characteristic mouth click at certain words in the lyrics. With the tenor, that click was very audible. I'd say it drew attention to it. And with the baritone, it was substantially less pronounced. Whether we are talking about the interconnect or the speaker cable, where again it must be noted that with the speaker cable, it was slightly more muffled. Yes. Now we'll move on to the next CD we were listening to. That was Bizet, Carmen, the Gypsy Song, second track.
Bizeta, Carmen, the Gypsy Song, druhý track, druhá skladba.
There we also had the chance to hear, after switching to the lower baritone, a bit of shading of the sound. The stage wasn't as large anymore, and the instruments weren't as distinct. It was simply less spacious and a bit covered up. And if we consider that basically, some time ago, we listened to the baritone as a top-tier cable going up. It was already a very, very good cable. This is a cable that doesn't have many competitors, meaning it has rivals, but in significantly higher price categories. And what's interesting is that you said plus or minus similar advantages about the baritone back then. Yes, exactly. Right. The baritone had exactly these advantages over other cables, and now there is something that even surpasses it. Adding the whipped cream on top, it's quite significant. That cable is significantly more spacious than the baritone. It lets the tracks breathe so much more that the question is, where are the limits? Well, yes.
Tak áno, skutočne si neviem povedať, že
In reality, I can't say in what way or to what extent the tenor still degrades the sound, because we all know every cable degrades something. And as long as we don't have an even better cable that degrades the sound less, we don't know where its weakness is and to what degree it degrades it. Because the space in Kari Bremnes and Bizet was simply so audible, so beautifully distinct. And the vocal expression, too. And it wasn't because of some treble boost in that ching-boom way. Tonally, there wasn't a shift, like too much bass or too much tinkling. Actually, yes. One more thing we should mention about the finale of that Bizet track. The impact of the tenor was manifested a bit more there. You could hear that it can give even the low end, the bass, more expression than the baritone. Yes. Even in the finale, with the complexity of the ending where all instruments were playing, it remained clear.
Aj tá komplexnosť toho záveru, kde všetky nástroje hrali, tak bola veľmi komplexná časť tej skladby a napriek tomu veľmi čitateľná. Napriek tomu ostala veľmi čitateľná.
It didn't blend into a single lump. It remained very transparent and easy to follow. They played quite loudly in the finale. We also have to say that the amplifiers had no problem with it. They kept up, and it's important that they gave the cables enough juice. But if something doesn't sound good, it's even more unpleasant when loud, because it's not nice to listen to. It almost cuts the ears. Yes, I know exactly what you mean. That when something is loud but low quality, it's even worse. Here we are moving between very good and excellent, or between excellent and even better. We are somewhere around there. It would definitely be very good to compare the tenor with the world's best cables. It would surely be interesting to compare it with cables that might have an extra zero on the price tag. That is already a big difference. That's why I said with the world's best. Really? Not looking at the price, but talking about prices where you could buy a more expensive car. Yes, a better car. Indeed. So that's how it is. And that track, Espana, from that CD, the second one we listened to, was probably the most complex and the most difficult. Even good audio systems can fail on this. It's a demanding piece, especially the finale at the end. The finale needs a really good amplifier and good speakers to keep it separated, to keep it transparent, so it doesn't blend into a mass. And we also listened, although we listened to this one the least, and we didn't return to it, because this test was also time-consuming. Yes, it is. It takes a while. So this CD, what a wonderful trio. By Tsuyoshi Yamamoto. Trio. We only heard that once, on the tenors. We liked it very much. We listened to it to have a third genre compared to the previous two. That's mainly what we wanted. Because Kari Bremnes is a bit jazzy, but a different direction. The second one is classical, clear, and this was such a classic jazz where you could hear classic drums, classic bass, just traditional instruments. And we especially enjoyed the drums there because the tenor gives them those little details on top that make it very interesting. And there are those cymbals that are so stretched or brushed. Yes, brushed. But it's clear, and it was really very well played and very audible, especially the drums and the piano from the side.
Veľmi dobre zahrané a veľmi dobre počuteľné, ako hlavne aj tie bicie, aj ten klavír z boku, ten hral tak z boku, oni ho mali tak namikrofonovaný.
It will be interesting to find out how this cable, the tenor, actually works, because we've found that it's excellent, even better than excellent. Now we have a system with a very powerful amplifier and Dynaudio speakers.
Bude zaujímavé práve zistiť, že ako bude fungovať s inými systémami. Teraz máme nejaký systém v celku s veľmi silným zosilovačom.
How will it work with tube amplifiers and significantly more sensitive speakers?
Ako to bude fungovať s elektrónkovými zosilovačmi a s podstatne citlivejšími reproduktormi napríklad, ktoré k nim patria. To bude zaujímavá.
No, ja som už to testoval.
Well, I've already tested it, and it improved the sound just like here, on tube monoblocks and with sensitive speakers. So a completely different system. Yes, and my experience is as follows. When the acoustics are bad, when conditions are poor and the setup is limited, the differences between cables are also less audible.
Je obmedzená, tak tam tie rozdiely medzi káblami aj menej počuť.
So the better the equipment we have and the better the environment, the more we need better and better cables, because that's where it shows. Of course, it also depends on the person, how they can evaluate the sound, and whether they can hear the differences and how demanding they are. So surely, the tenor will appeal to a more demanding person who already has better audio equipment, hears the differences, and wants to enjoy the highest quality possible. It's simply that good.
Tenor osloví náročnejšieho človeka, ktorý už má aj lepšie audio zariadenie a rozdiely počuje a chce si vychutnať čo najkvalitnejšie, lebo ten zážitok z počúvania hudby tebe už nemusím hovoriť. Jednoducho je tak dobré, že
Yes, it's true that it actually enhances the experience of the whole musical production and becomes an important element. Yes, very important, I'd say, because the differences are so significant that when you hear them side by side, having the chance to test them one by one, that's when you see how much you've progressed. And if you swapped it, put in another cable, but played a different recording, could I tell you what is connected? Which of the two cables? We always tested by changing only one cable. Would you be able to tell on another recording which cable is used? If the recording were good enough? Of course, on a bad recording, no. Though maybe even on a bad recording it could be determined. I think it's a detectable thing. Even if you don't know the recording, even if you don't know it, if you get it played first with one cable and then the other, I think it's recognizable. The difference is so marked that it's very unlikely not to. The recording would have to be very bad to cover up those differences. Yes, it's possible it would cover up the difference in quality.
Ktoré by zakryli tie rozdiely, áno, môže byť, ktoré by zakryli ten rozdiel v kvalite a že by to nebolo počuteľné, alebo že by to bolo veľmi málo počuteľné.
I understand, I can imagine it, but as I said, with the standard recordings that audiophiles listen to, if it's a quality recording, then it's definitely audible.
Elektronická hudba, tak určite, pokiaľ to je kvalitne nahraté, tak to je počuteľné.
The first Kari Bremnes song, despite being jazzy, is basically a modern recording. And it's not very acoustic. It's more of a studio thing. And yet the difference in sound between the cables was very audible. Not just in the high frequencies, but right down in the bass and mid-bass. I think it's very recognizable. Okay, what else could we say to this? Well, I'm curious now, when it comes to this big comparison with something more expensive, whether the more expensive ones will allow the result to be presented. Because it seems to me that this tenor cable is so far ahead that the question is where we'll even find an equal for it. It surely exists, but we might have to search much longer than before.
Určite existuje, môže byť, že existuje, len budeme musieť oveľa dlhšie hľadať ako doteraz.
That's for the future.
Ale teším sa na to teda.
And thank you for watching our test. And bye. Bye.
Ahojte.
If you liked the video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out my other videos too.